National Democrats facing flat out terrible approval ratings. Take a look at Quinnipiac. 19% think that Democrats are doing a good job. The party's underwater with everyone, including men, a key group that President Trump doubled his lead with between the 2020 and the 2024 elections. So you can see why they're trying to fix that problem. And Minnesota Governor Tim Walz tried explaining that shift on a podcast with former DNC chair Jamie Harrison, who they're hoping will be the new Joe Rogan for Dems.
I think, again, I've got a young one. My son was able to vote as an 18-year-old. And I asked him about his take is, especially young white man is he said, Dad, a lot of them aren't about the policies. Mm-hmm. They're about the thrill and the excitement. And, Trump brings the circus type of thing and that type of acknowledgement. Now, I think I would make the case there's a lot of toxicity in that.
A lot of toxicity. All right, let's bring in Jason Miller, former senior advisor to the Trump transition team. He worked on all three of the Trump presidential races. And Robert Wolf, Fox News contributor and former economic advisor to President Obama. Great to have both of you with us. Toxicity is what drove, calling men toxic, Robert, is what drove young men away. Does he not understand that?
Yeah, I'm surprised we're at 19%. I think I'd rather be in Jason's seat today. But to be very frank, I mean, Trump derangement syndrome is not a winning strategy. Whether it's Governor Walz or Jamie Harrison, I mean, the Democrats have to start being for something. I actually think like the big, beautiful bill, we should have said we were for middle income tax cuts, but we didn't agree with the high earner tax cuts. So I just think that this whole idea of we're doing the same old playbook, that we lost the presidency, the Senate, and the House is not working. And so, and once again, Jamie Harrison is no Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan's been an umpire calling balls and strikes. I don't always agree with him, but at least he kind of has no filter and will go where other people won't. So
yeah, you can. I can think of some other people who might be a little bit more effective in that role, but we'll see how he does. Here's Hunter Biden, because he also made his podcast reappearance. First time we've seen him since the election in a long interview. Here's this, Jason.
Do you think Joe Biden was involved in some cover-up? Do you think Jake Tapper's telling the truth when he says that I was the acting chief of staff of the president? I was in that White House 12 days over the course of the last 2 years of the administration. Clearly, because I had other things going on. Okay? You ask one person to go on the record that would ever tell you that I was in any way making a single decision about anything in that White House.
He said that Democrats abandoned his father, that the Biden White House was incredibly successful. And I love the look on Jamie Harrison's face. He's just kind of like, Jason, your thoughts?
Yeah, Martha, this is like Christmas in July. I get to come on here and talk about Where's Hunter, as well as Governor Jazz Hands himself, Tim Walz. I mean, the fact of the matter is Hunter Biden has sold 0 paintings for $500,000 since his father left office. I mean, Joe Biden said that Hunter was the smartest person that he knew. And I don't know if anyone actually was in charge. I think the closest thing to a chief of staff that Joe Biden probably had, just to defend Hunter a little bit, was probably the auto pen, because the auto pen was making all the decisions. In fact, I think President Trump is spot on to be calling this out, and I think there should be a congressional investigation looking back. And actually, I guess right now they're depoting and subpoenaing a number of former Biden aides to find out, did Joe even know that he was signing these pardons? Did he even know he's putting these policies into place? Because as we look to the serious side of things, these Joe Biden policies allowed 15 million illegals into the country. It helped pass a couple of massive inflationary spending bills, and it really hurt America.
Well, it's interesting, Robert, that it's very backward looking, right? You have the former vice presidential candidate. You have the former president who was pushed out of the campaign, his son focused on. And then you've got Mamdani getting all this attention, going to the White House. And another pretty incredible poll that says that most Democrat members of Congress should not be reelected. 58% is where that number lands. So who should be leading this podcast? Who is the Joe Rogan that can be sort of edgy and bring Democrats into prominence again?
I don't know whether it's a Joe Rogan because he was a Democrat and then he was a pro-Trumper and now he's kind of, back to the middle. So I think it's someone who's just kind of speaking truth to power. I think Democrats have a very strong bench. with people like Governor Shapiro and Wes Moore, and they have to get out there and be the leaders. But the ones who are on TV is mainly just the ones talking about Trump. They bring it front and center. And having Hunter Biden on, who is irrelevant in the Democratic Party, you know, I don't want to quote Jason, but Christmas in July. I mean, come on now.
Jason, what about this New York mayor race? The president has indicated that he wants to sort of stay on the sidelines, but I thought it was very interesting. He made a comment the other day about Cuomo, and he said, well, you know, he should stay in. He should stay in. That is a very loaded statement if you're Eric Adams.
Yeah, well, if you take a look at the polling, there have been several of these that have come out recently. Andrew Cuomo is only down by single digits to Zohran Mamdani. And so if you look about who really is in position to actually win the race, it probably is Cuomo. And again, I would love nothing more than to see Zohran Mamdani be the face of the Democrat Party going into the midterms. We talk about government-run grocery stores, the opposition to even owning a home, all of the crazy stuff, taxing white neighborhoods more than other neighborhoods. I would love for that to be the case, but there will be people who are hurt in New York City if Mamdani is elected mayor.
Do you think President Trump wants that, though? I mean, do you think he wants someone to beat Mamdani? Or does he want something to run against, like Reagan and the San Francisco Democrats in 1984?
Yeah, great question. So I have not discussed Mamdani with President Trump, but I know that President Trump would not want him to win. That would be terrible. And the president loves New York City. I mean, that's where he's from. He does not want to see the city hurt like this. But at this moment, I don't see him jumping in and getting active at all. But boy, I tell you, if Mamdani is the face of the Democrat Party going into the midterms, it shows not only they have a policy problem where they support tax hikes and open borders and all the other craziness, they also have a candidate problem where they have some real nut jobs at the top of their ticket.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. Good to see you both. Thank you.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.